Hey everybody, welcome to Database episode 4. So Tom Redmond is off today, so we're going to mix things up a little bit. When the cat's away, the mice will play. So James and I, Convex co-founder, we are going to talk a little bit about the product that we are building here. And a lot of founders will be happy to tell you why their product is awesome. We certainly try when we get a chance. But today we're going to do something a little different. We've decided what we're going to do is we're making an episode about why Convex sucks. So we've each put together a short list of things about Convex that are trade-offs of things that we don't like about Convex, things that we know some of our users don't like about Convex. And we're just going to put them out there. It's like, why not? You can't deny them. I mean, eventually people will run into them. It's better to kind of own them and then, try to talk about what we're doing about them. So hopefully you'll find it interesting, informative, team building and kind of how they feel about their current product. As a background, Convex is a backend as a service. It's for full stack developers that want to be able to solve sophisticated backend problems with just a little bit of code and just be able to use TypeScript to solve everything. So people use it because they want to move fast. They want to ship stuff quickly. They don't want they want to spend a lot of time on backend engineering. That's why it's good. So now that we've covered that, let's dive into why Convex sucks. Here we go. Hey James, how you doing?
Hey Jamie, I'm doing okay.
You're doing okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
I'm about to ruin your day. I have some bad news for you.
Oh, this is not good.
No, it's not good. So, your product kind of sucks.
Jamie, this is a crazy coincidence, and I don't know how to tell you this, but
yeah,
I came on this podcast to tell you that your product sucks.
No, that can't be right.
No, it does. It sucks.
Well, I guess we have to just conclude, since we have the same product, I guess our product sucks a little bit, doesn't it?
In some respects, yes.
Yeah. How's that make you feel?
It makes me feel like it won with the universe of software developers.
Yeah.
Because everything sucks, doesn't it?
That's true. It does all suck a little bit.
And I feel a little bit after the podcast episodes where we've, thrown some shade.
Right.
On some important things.
Politely, but
polite shade on things like SQL and server components and the NoSQL movement. Perhaps we deserve a bit of shade thrown on ourselves.
Yeah, it's our turn. Yeah.
All right. I'm ready to spend some time in the shade.
Sounds good. Well, in the spirit of that, I think you have your list over there. I have mine. We both put together a little short list here of things that suck about Convex. And we're just going to own these things and run through them a little bit and find out why Convex sucks. So maybe I'll get started with the first one.
I think I'm getting started with the first one. I'm gonna pose it to you.
Oh, are you?
You're gonna either accept it or defend it.
All right, let's. All right, go ahead, hit me with it.
Hey, Jamie, the issue I have with Convex is it's something new to learn. Like I gotta learn a new thing. There's so much stuff out there. Like the web development community is just so overwhelmingly complicated, and there's new frameworks and new things that come along every day.
Maybe every second.
Every second there's something new, and then you're telling me I've got to learn a whole new thing.
A whole new thing.
Ugh.
I have to acknowledge it is true. So it is a trade-off of Convex that you do have to learn something new. It's really reasonable. A lot of times developers are looking for a solution. There's a lot of solutions out there that are a better version of something they already know. And what's really beneficial about that, you can hit the ground running, you can start building something right away. So, a lot of developers know how to use traditional databases, traditional controllers. And so if they've got a really nice hosted database system or a nice hosting provider, then, they can bring these skills in and probably be really productive in the first couple hours or whatever, because they're doing patterns they already know. It definitely is a trade-off with Convex, that Convex works a little differently than things you've used before. So you do have to learn a few new things to be productive in Convex. To me, it's a little bit of that whole easy to learn versus easy to use thing. Like Convex aspires to be very easy to use in the long run. We want you to be very productive with Convex, but it does mean that learning will take a little bit more upfront time from you to kind of engage with how it's different.
And how would you characterize if you were to plot a graph of the learning experience on Convex, right? Like day 1 through day, 1000. And in two dimensions, one dimension is like conceptual learning, like wrapping your head around concepts. And one is I don't know how to describe it, like tactical, pragmatic methods, syntax, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think for most developers, it's the first time they're using Convex. I mean, the concepts might take them anywhere from a few hours to a week or a week and a half, depending on how much they've worked with, things that were kind of reactive reflow, data flow kind of systems before. So it can take anywhere from a few hours to a few days to, or maybe at the longest a week to really click. But yeah, I mean, the reason they kind of stick around is that if that's an appropriate amount of time to put in for to learn something really new for you, you often you're shipping 2 times, 3 times faster your project after that. So, but it is to acknowledge if you want to get something done using your existing skill set for Convex, you are going to have to put in a little work and engage with how it's different and how to think about modeling back-end problems on Convex.
What's the sunk cost? Like, what's the return on investment here? What's the sunk cost? Like, I've got a new project and someone says, hey, try Convex out for it. Like, how much is it going to slow me down?
I mean, I think for most developers, it's maybe the first couple days you're learning a few concepts. I mean, to be honest, you're normally already more productive halfway through your first week. So that's kind of what you have to be willing to budget. But yeah, and then I think the method side, because you also asked about the methods. I mean, it's also fair to acknowledge like the method side, even after really the concepts click, when you're like, oh, I would apply these concepts this way. What's the way people usually do that? Or is there a library that did that or something like that? I think there's a discovery process there where you're finding new standard methods and best practices there that can last for, several weeks or a couple months or whatever. So you're usually still shipping faster just because the overall productivity at higher level abstraction is so great. Even while you're discovering those methods, you're probably already in the net win time when you're doing method discovery.
And I think for new folks using Convex, I think some of the biggest things to grapple are some of the concepts around like queries and mutations and transactions, and just to wrap your head around the fact that like, hey, everything is a transaction. Like you write a TypeScript program, it runs as a transaction. There's no race conditions, it just runs. And to think about, hey, you can just subscribe to a query and it's automatically cached and it's automatically reactive. So there's like a bit of like a speed hump to get over conceptually to understand like what the hell's going on here.
Yeah.
And so it's, I guess in some respects, it's a platform where you have to get on board with like the Zen of Convex.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think another way to put it, which it sounds like it trivializes it, but I actually don't want to trivialize it, is, with Convex, a lot of times we say there's actually only really one big idea you have to learn with Convex. It's just that really, and it's the idea you mentioned. It's sort of the relationship of queries and mutations and actions. And then you realize all the other ideas are built out of that. But it usually takes a few cycles of applying that different ways before the conceptual shape of those things clicks. And then once that happens, usually you're pretty excited because you realize you can solve all kinds of problems with this one tool, and then it becomes pretty fun.
All right, so you're asserting that sure, it takes a few days to wrap your head around Convex.
Yes.
Once you've done that, it's not too hard to use.
No, it's quite.
I guess it's using TypeScript anyway.
Yeah, it's quite easy to use. But I will say that once you've done that, maybe something to throw back at you.
Yeah.
So you're sitting there, you've gotten Convex concepts down. This Convex school of thought is your new religion. You're very excited about it. How am I not going to be locked in? Isn't locked in another one of these big problems that we have to worry about?
I mean, that's a real concern, right? And I think there's two lock in can mean two different things, right? It can mean like, is your company like trapped on Convex? And so for folks who have used Convex would understand this, but if you're using Convex as your kind of back end, it becomes a huge part of your stack, right? Yeah. You have your front end and then there's just Convex. So you can think about lock in terms of like, well, your company is beholden to this other company called Convex if you kind of throw down on it. And there's a second kind of lock-in you might be concerned about, which is kind of like skills lock-in. Mm-hmm. Like, are you specializing as being a Convex developer, and are those skills transferable? And should you be instead spending that time, I don't know, learning about what a left inner join is or something?
Yeah, a left inner join.
How to set up Kafka.
Yeah. Is my LinkedIn going to have to say Convex developer next to my name from now on? And I will only be employable at places that use Convex.
That's a bit sad, isn't it?
I mean, a little sad.
Yeah. I don't know which order to address these two topics in, because I'm going to talk about the second one first, because the first one is something you might genuinely be concerned about, right? I think if you're a software developer, I would hope, I don't want to say this in like too much of a douchey way, but I hope you would think more of yourself than just being the expert on a specific tool. Like, you're not just a Convex developer or a Firebase developer or a Kafka user or like a SQL programmer, right? Hopefully you think of yourself as a software engineer, right? Mm-hmm. A person who builds stuff, builds cool things. And the hard part about software engineering, the people who build like an established base of skills, is not picking up a new platform. Like you said, you can come and pick up Convex in a couple of days, especially if you know TypeScript or JavaScript. You can get going in literally 10 minutes, to be honest, if you follow the tutorial. So it's not like it's this huge conceptual mountain to cross, right? And then you're just a software engineer. Right? And then if you decide to not use Convex one day, well, then you go learn something else. And I think you'll pick that up pretty fast too. And so I think the strength of Convex is it allows you to not have to learn a whole bunch of things that you probably don't need to learn and are becoming increasingly commoditized. And I'll give you an example. Jamie, you and I are experts on some things that don't matter anymore. Right?
That's true.
You and I have literally built our data centers, and we've designed storage systems down to bare metal, and we've directly instructed the disk head in a disk to move around. And I can tell you about power distribution in a data center and all these things. And guess what? There's like 5 companies in the world where I could take that knowledge and actually be effective.
Right. Yep.
And so we learned this, all this stuff. We had to learn it to start with, and we learned it because we were building a giant storage system at Drop.
But James, it must have been wasted time because you can't literally design power distribution units anymore, right?
No, because it made my brain better. I don't know, like it just like who cares about these skills, right? What matters is solving problems, right? And so I would suggest. I mean, I guess in some respects it is wasted time. Like if you're doing something that's not needed, that's not differentiated, it's a waste of time. Like I don't think you have to go out and be a deep expert on the idiosyncratic differences between, say, Postgres and MySQL. It's not particularly relevant to most software engineers these days. And so if you can find a platform, whether it's Convex or something else, which allows you to focus on building an application, the most highly differentiated, most valuable thing you can do as a software engineer, then great. Right. Then you spend less time learning some esoteric skills that you may not need anymore.
I think that there's a flipping around one of the maybe criticisms that comes Convex this way for a second, or a lot of novel platforms, to be honest, not just Convex. But people will say, these are not new ideas. These are repackaging of old ideas. And the answer to that is absolutely yes. I mean, if anything, it's part of why I think, at least on the employability side, lock-in is not that much of a worry, is because when you adopt these new technologies, especially if they're really speaking to you, there's something as an engineer that you really like about them, it's a kind of lens into fundamental ideas about how to shape, logic and reasoning and desire in software. And so it just happens to be you're using the Convex way to do it. But there's a more fundamental muscle you're actually building when you use any of these new things that feel like they're more elegant, they're more surfacing what I'm actually trying to express, that still is building that muscle about how to just be better at getting software to do things. And as you said, the next framework you run into after Convex, God forbid you move on from Convex.
Why would you ever move
on from Convex? But the next thing you run into, the muscle you build using Convex will definitely have strengthened your kind of general reasoning ability. So you grab another framework and you can find a way to model problems on it too.
Yeah, I mean, being a software engineer is more than being a programmer, right?
Yeah, or memorizing a book.
Programmer is the craft, right? And software engineers how to solve problems with a whole bunch of skills together. So anyway, I guess I'm being dismissive of that, but I think anytime you can avoid learning something you don't have to learn, bonus, right? Yeah. Because, by the way, you don't just turn your brain off then. You just go learn a whole bunch of new things, right? How to make, how to scale a company and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But there was 2 parts to this question. One was about
the company
lock-in.
Yeah.
What do you do if Convex goes away? Well, that's an interesting question.
That's a tricky one, yeah.
And it's something that, hey, people worry about sometimes and ask us about. And so what do we do about that? Well, one thing we've done to try to help people worry less about it is to open source Convex.
Right.
So Convex is open source. Well, at least the version of Convex that runs on a single machine is open source. And so you can self-host Convex. You can run it yourself. I don't care. It's open source with a fairly permissive license. It's called FSL, the functional source license. So you can do anything you want with that source code except directly compete with us for 2 years. Mm-hmm. After 2 years, it becomes Apache 2, and then you can literally do anything you want. And you could go and resell. You could take 2-year-old Convex source code and resell it and compete directly with us. So it's a very permissive software license. So one thing you can do is run Convex yourself if you need to.
Yeah.
And then I guess the reality is, Convex is a well-funded, successful company, right, that doesn't plan to go away. and we plan to keep this running, and the gains in productivity for our customers from using Convex outweigh the risks that come with betting on another service provider.
Yeah.
But yeah, for some folks, they're not going to want to do that, and that's okay. I get it. So.
I think over time, we aspire to earn, and we'll continue to earn just kind of more and more confidence that lock-in risk, which I think is a real concern and makes sense, is one that is appropriate to take for your company just because of the productivity gains. I think that you read the startup books and all this, like the kind of space we find ourselves in is we're making something kind of new here. And like this would be called it's a category we're trying to make or something like that. And it's never the right outcome for a new player to somehow you imagine a new category is emerging and we're going to be we're going to take 100% of it. We're going to be the whole market, right? First of all, it'd be completely unhealthy for us, for the market, for lots of other things. What we really want with the category is we would love to have more and more kind of Convex-like things in there with us, because it actually is good both for our customers and for us to have kind of the competitive pressure to stay a great company, to a great service to use and things like that. But until that exists, the one way to think about the open source thing is at least we're let's compete against the open source thing, right? It's let's provide some alternatives just to seed let's make this a little bit more of a movement and not just one company, because I do think when people have these concerns, those concerns are very real. We would love for there to be rich alternatives to Convex so that we can be we're going to be the best one, but absolutely there should be other ones. And I think with time that will happen. But yeah, for right now, we're getting that started in open source in a way we sort of seed our first competitor by releasing it.
Yeah, hey, we'll compete with ourselves. And I'm thinking both of us come from the pre-cloud era. So we were both professional software developers and ran kind of infrastructure teams in an era really before the cloud was a big thing, or at least before it was trusted. And so we remember a time where people would have thought it was completely irresponsible to use AWS or to use RDS or any managed service or host your website on Vercel. Everything was done by hand because you just didn't trust third parties.
Yeah.
And those days are over. I mean, almost every company, apart from a very small handful, uses cloud services. And the reason they do is because they realize that there's a capitalist advantage from doing so, right? Yep. Because they get to outsource problem solving to someone else, and that's not being lazy, because they take all those spare engineering cycles and they translate that into building better products.
Right.
So every now and then you have these folks on Hacker News or Slashdot or whatever saying, oh well, if you move to the cloud, you're an idiot because you're not owning your own stuff, and the right way is to build everything from scratch. But if you do that, then you don't end up with a good product. Yeah, right? At the end of the day, the whole point of being a software engineer, for most people, hopefully, is building good products that human beings use.
Yeah.
And in many respects, you just can't compete with a team that's leveraging cloud infrastructure,
right?
Because they're spending all their engineering time on building cool stuff instead of building backend.
Yeah, they're building things their customers see, which is, that's how they're going to create value the fastest. Yeah, I think if we could magically manifest ourselves as both Coke and Pepsi at the same time, as long as we were Coke, obviously that would be healthier for everyone and all that kind of stuff. But what we can't do, whether it's Innovator's Dilemma or all those various things been written, while it's a genuine challenge we have to work on over time, is to build the trust that lock-in is not a problem or lock-in no longer exists. We can't have that stop us from innovating. You can't be we're never going to make something new, because then you'll be the first one and everyone will say, well, it's awesome, but I couldn't adopt it because lock-in's that's fair. But somebody has to be the tip of the spear and go out there and say, hey, let's try to make the next generation of whatever's. And then also you mentioned Amazon. We talk a lot about Amazon. I mean, I think part of how Amazon was sort of allowed to forge this is that Amazon was actually a great vendor and a great company. Amazon treated its customers right. And so if you put in enough time to build that reputation, then more and more companies over time are convinced that okay, I'm going to be in business with someone that I trust, and so therefore worries about lock-in diminish over time as we earn that reputation. So, and that's what we're working on, right? So
absolutely. All right, Jamie. So we've talked about lock-in.
Yeah.
And then the risk to some companies and the benefit to others. But what am I getting locked in on? This is an all-in-one kind of inclusive platform,
Yeah.
does it give me all the stuff that I need? Like, what if
Yeah.
I want something you don't even have?
Right. Yeah, I think it's almost like the all the lock-in stuff we talked about, like, who signs up for that adventure? What are they looking for? And one of the things that Convex does, and one of the reasons people use it, right, is because it makes a lot of choices for you. Convex is opinionated, right? So in order to really provide people a productivity benefit, what we actually want to do is provide them a higher level abstraction that is kind of opting them into the right ways to do that. And so one of the things that happens with our customers sometimes and our users is that they sign up and they say, okay, I'm here for the opinionation, right? And wow, you guys have made all these choices, but you've only made this many, right? Like, I have a richer set of problems I'm trying to solve. And in some respects, Convex is still a relatively low-level platform. So we have lots of people in our community and our Discord that come chat with us at conferences. And a lot of times what they'll say is like, I'm doing things the convex way. I'm doing all of these things. It's been working out really well so far. But like, then when I try to do something like, I'll give an example, like authentication in my app or something like that, a lot of times your team says, yeah, there's lots of libraries out there. Like, you could use any of these 5 ways, right? And so what's interesting is that, it's almost like in for a penny, in for a pound kind of thing. It's like people say, well, I showed up because you guys helped to make great choices. Like, could you just tell me which one I should use, right? So I guess the criticism would be like, hey, does Convex make enough choices? Is it high level enough, right? Are we bundling enough opinionation in it so that you can be as productive as you want to be? So okay, I have to choose which authentication system to use. I have to choose what kind of authorization scheme to use. How do I integrate my static data with CDN? Like, it can be done, but you have to write the code. And so yeah, this is definitely right now. I think it's pretty fair to acknowledge that within our user base, there's a desire for even more of a bundled offering, right? There was a thread kind of went crazy on Twitter a few weeks ago about Laravel and people pining for PHP and the simplicity of one package and everything built in, like Laravel Spark or whatever. So we don't really quite have that yet. I mean, Convex has great building blocks to make that, but we haven't shipped that really. And that is one of the things that we are a little behind on, and we intend to make some progress on pretty soon. So, we've been talking to our community pretty frequently in the last 6 months about Convex components, which is a system we're using to be able to package up major backend features in a reusable way and stuff like that. Because we want to get this components framework out the door, because our vision is what we want to do is develop and sort of bundle a number of components into a higher level package, kind of like Laravel Spark or something like that, so that you do have an even more capable full stack backend framework, right?
And when you say components, you mean kind of like modules that the community can develop that drop in the Convex. So there's this vanilla Convex, which is the kind of core set of abstractions, but then you can kind of drop in modules that might give you geospatial indexing, or there might just be a Stripe module.
Payments integration that you just install it and you've automatically got a little state machine that keeps you in sync with Stripe or stuff like that. Or one of our favorite partners is Clerk for authentication. So, one thing all of our users have to do is they have to wire up, I make a webhook and Clerk calls me back when user data changes, and I put that into my users table from the webhook. And so with something like Component can automatically register a webhook somewhere inside of your project. It can automatically register that with Clerk, and there'd just be a table that was magically in sync with no work on your side. So it's just things like that where we kind of can do more. And I think at this point we've got enough feedback. We've decided that we probably should do more. And so that is going to be one of the focuses in the next 2 quarters, is figuring out how do we put together that next higher level opinionated stack that kind of solves more problems and has a little more opinionation built into it. Yeah, because we'd love for people to say, all the things I like about Laravel Spark or whatever, here's an amazing modern TypeScript version of that, right? That's even more powerful because it's got that Convex core built into it.
Yeah, but you've talked about, so I get cool. If Convex is missing a feature, it's easy to build those features, and there's a component system to make it even easier to build those and reuse them. Great. But you use the word opinionated quite a lot.
Yeah.
And you use opinionated insofar as I wish we were more opinionated. People are hungry for opinions, right? But what if I don't like your opinions?
Yeah.
Could opinionated mean restrictive?
Yeah.
in a way that maybe makes it that I can't even build what I want to build?
It's a great question. Unsurprisingly, you're asking it since we talk about this stuff all the time, right? So I think a little built into some of the frustration, because remember, Convex sucks, that people feel about this stuff is, why is it taking so long to ship some of these things? And the component system is in a way kind of to blame. The reason we did it that way is because our experience with projects is that when you're getting started, you kind of would like, just give me something that just works and has all the choices made in it. And we know from, because our eyes here on building a system that will go the distance with you for 5 or 10 years or whatever. As projects evolve, as teams grow, as you get more experts in-house that have stronger opinions about how to solve problems, anything that's too opinionated in too many places, sometimes you can get a little locked into a way of working that is not the way that is appropriate anymore for your product and then that kind of thing can make it so that Convex is kind of only a toy, or it's only good for like hackathons or whatever. And so components, the way that we're doing it is, there's this kind of view we had that, like, if anything, that core of Convex, that first thing that we shipped last summer, at this point, actually, most of the work we've done recently is to shrink it, as you know, is actually to kind of make it a little smaller and to build more of the world out of components, because components are just going to be open source projects that happen to be in our repo, but all of our users can develop them just as easily as we can, right? So to the thing you're asking, if there's an opinion that we've shipped that no longer works for you, you can alter it, you can send us a PR, you can swap it out for a component you develop yourself. So we want the opinionated parts of Convex to be able to be quite flexible to being ready to change as your project and team grows.
Yeah, when you're saying this, you're reminding me of the genesis of Convex when we were writing and designing this thing years ago. And the phrase we kind of threw around a lot back then was we were trying to build the new operating system for application development.
Right.
And we don't use that in our marketing because it sounds like too grandiose.
Sounds weird.
Yeah, it sounds like we're drinking our own Kool-Aid too much, right?
Right.
But that was the impetus, right? It was to try to think of like what are the right primitives. Mm-hmm. And what is the right? We use the word abstraction like every day. If you were to come work at Convex, you would just get sick of how many times I use the word abstraction every day.
Right.
Because the number one thing we can do, the number one value we can contribute is think of like the right abstractions, the right tools, the right APIs that simplify all the business of back-end management without restricting you.
Yeah.
And this happens successfully in many aspects of our lives, right? Like operating systems are very successful abstractions. People don't tend to peer through the operating system abstraction, even when I was in grad school, I remember there being a paper, I think it was called Exterminate All Operating System Abstractions or Eliminate All Operating System Abstractions. And there was this argument that these abstractions get in the way because they mask hardware interrupts and whatever it is. I don't forget the paper now, but I haven't heard that argument for the past 20 years.
Right.
I don't really hear people arguing these days that, oh, well, it sucks to have Linux in the way. Like, people don't want to talk to their hardware anymore, right? Yeah. And so we're just like, you know what, POSIX or whatever kind of abstraction we're dealing with right now is good enough for everybody else.
Yeah.
And even language runtimes to a large extent are good enough. And you don't actually want to directly manage the memory anymore. Yeah. And so our argument is we think Convex is the right set of abstractions.
Yeah, yeah.
And so far we haven't seen much feedback that it's not.
Yeah, so far it's feeling pretty good. I think that, there was another, everything's a Twitter thread these days, right? But there was a Twitter thread the other day that was, there's a lot of stuff happening in the JavaScript ecosystem, right? So like someone was making, I think, a very understandable kind of complaint about the complexity. And it turned into, like, I'll paraphrase here, but like, hey, you should actually just learn how this stuff really works, because at the end of the day, that's, what we're going to go back to, like, and it's going to fail you, and then you need to write the low-level stuff again. The implication being there, like, I guess, in web development, right? So it's this argument that pops up every now and then, like, screw all this thrash with people trying new higher-level abstractions. Let's just write vanilla JavaScript. Let's just go back to using Nginx and jQuery and PHP or whatever. But when I see these things, the thing I sort of say in my mind is like, Oh, it's incredibly capable. You're able to type that tweet from your handwritten operating system,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So the truth about abstractions that we don't always admit is that as soon as they're really complete, they disappear, and then we stop criticizing them, right? So abstraction absolutely does work, right? It can take a while until we find the right one, but then when we do find it, it's almost a disappearing abstraction because it's so complete, right? That like it's just automatic. It becomes like the tap water. You turn it on, it definitely does that thing. It gets integrated into your mental model for how you build. And then you say, of course, things have always worked that way, right? So I think that what we're trying to do is we really are trying to make that for sort of the full stack developer or whatever, this next generation of engineers. And we haven't quite gotten it yet, but I think we're kind of getting close, and that's what the aspiration is. So the stuff that's like, let's throw this all away and go back to, I just think we're getting to the iteration here where we're trying to find where is the abstraction so complete that it just delights us and we kind of forget how it works. It's not middle magic. It's full magic as opposed to no magic. And yeah, that's the aspiration on our side. But yes, with this criticism going back to like Convex Sucks, because we're talking about how Convex sucks. Yeah.
Are we being too defensive?
No.
I don't know.
Probably.
Maybe we are.
I think it's very fair to say every one of these things is a very legitimate complaint right now. Some of them we can fix quickly, some will take time, but I think we all, in many respects, are the things we worry about too, because we use our own system all the time. So yes, if you're going to go in on opinionation and someone says, yep, I like your flavor of Gatorade, like, where's the rest of it? Like, we actually don't have the rest of it shipped yet. We're trying to be principled to how we do that, but because we are being principled, it's not out yet. Right? But, here's one thing is that this new magical system, it does all this amazing stuff for you, James. It has these new abstractions in it. And then there's like a price tag next to all those abstractions. Like, what the hell is a function call, right, in this parlance, right? Maybe the next criticism I challenge you to defend or refute or agree with, right, is it, I don't know if Convex is too expensive or too cheap, but it's very difficult to know for real projects, what is this new thing going to cost, right? Yeah. All these serverless bills that people see, again, on Twitter, that are like through the roof, and people are like, no more serverless, I'm back to writing my own kernel or whatever. Like, what do we do about this, about Convex maybe being way too expensive and being difficult to predict that?
There's so many ways to address that. And I want to say that there are a subset of people in the world for whom have an application that has very high workload requirements and doesn't make much money. And those people are in a tricky place because paying for Convex is probably not a good idea for those people. Now, we have this kind of generous free plan, and we have bajillion customers using the free plan and running real products on our free plan. But there's going to be some folks who just need this huge amount of storage, and we're going to charge them for it, right? Mm-hmm. And they're going to say, whoa, that's too expensive.
Right.
And cool, I get it. Some people just, they're in a tricky place because at the end of the day, if they're going to run this stuff themselves, they're going to have to pay for something, mm-hmm. right? We used to have this at Dropbox, and people would complain about how much storage cost. And I'm like, no, it's a lot cheaper than running it yourself, right? If you care about reliability, mm-hmm. and if you care about availability everywhere, it's not cheaper than sticking it on a hard drive in your bedroom, but that's not what you're competing against. So there's a conceptual turning point, right? Either you have a business that makes money or you have a product that makes money, in which case most software as a service is pretty cheap, frankly, right? For two reasons. One, and I'll get to your question about how to estimate this in a second.
Yeah.
So most SaaS is actually cheap. And we know this actually because our job used to be replacing SaaS with in-house stuff. We moved Dropbox's exabytes of storage off of Amazon S3 onto a storage system we built. And I can say firsthand that it's very, very difficult to compete with a major cloud provider on cost if you want the same guarantees that they provide, right? So for most companies, SaaS is actually cheap. Most SaaS companies' profit margins are not that large. Mm-hmm. They're certainly larger than retail. But retail meaning Amazon makes more money off AWS than they do off selling Kleenex. Most companies, their profit margins aren't enormous, and also they're able to do things way cheaper than you probably.
Yeah,
right? Because they have a team of specialists who are really good at building highly efficient systems, and as we do here, we have people who are really, really, really good at building cost-effective systems, and we have economies of scale. So we can kind of pack workloads into machines and stuff and get good unit economics. The other thing I'll say is why at Convex we use a ton of third parties.
Tons.
And I see all the bills, and every now and then I'm like, oh wow, it's paying $10,000 for this or whatever. GitHub Actions, you see the bill and you're like, oh no, like, is that worth it?
Yeah.
And then you think for a second, wait a second, like, how much engineering time are we saving from this?
How expensive is an engineer?
Like, a lot of people who say SaaS is expensive only do so because they value their time at zero. It's zero. And if you're listening to this, and you're a hobbyist, maybe you do value your time at zero, which is fine. Like, when I was younger, I used to love, Gentoo Linux, which was a Linux distribution where you compile everything yourself, and it was like a hobbyist almost operating system. And I loved spending all my evenings messing around with configurations and compiler flags. That was fun for me.
Yeah.
Right? So my time was worth zero. In fact, my time might have even had negative value because I liked doing this thing.
Yeah, you'd almost pay to do it.
I'd always pay to do it, right? But now I run a company.
Yeah.
And my job is to produce value.
Right.
And I pay, the company pays the salaries of our employees, right? Which are all pretty high,
right?
And so almost any time we can pay someone else to do a job for us is a huge cost savings for us.
It is.
With the caveats, everyone's heard those stories about, say, Boeing, outsourced everything. And I'm sure there's other examples of other companies that they just keep outsourcing so much and they use so many consultants that they forget to do their core product. Right. Yeah. So I think companies absolutely should focus on their core business.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're building a database company, you're probably not building a database company on top of Convex. Like, you're probably building your own database. Right. But if you're building an insurance company, or if you're building a task management app or any kind of application,
right,
the thing that matters to your business is the app.
Yeah.
Right? It's not the infra.
No.
So just pay someone else to do it. And I don't know, it's going to sound like I have a conflict of interest here. I do have a conflict of interest here, right? Because I want people to pay Convex to do this, but I will say we do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
If there's ever an opportunity to pay someone else to do something that doesn't matter to our business, we will pay that person to do it, and then we'll focus on what matters to us.
Yeah, just to underscore, agree with your legitimizing the hobbyist, right? We sometimes have people show up and, developers are great developers, and they're doing something on the side for fun. And they'll say, oh, this service over here is $11 a month and you guys are $25 a month, right? And so if you're, sometimes when you're a hobbyist, you're in the headspace that effectively I'm valuing my time at $0, right? And if that's the headspace you're in, that's totally fine. And even these days, it used to be, well, that was your only choice. Now we allow self-hosting Convex open source if you want. So you could still use Convex if you want, even if you want it for $0, right? But at the end of the day, even if like this is one of the things we've said to a lot of our happy customers, stuff like that. It's like, no, it's at a certain point it is going to cost something, because like one of the things we pride ourselves on is like, I think Convex's support is incredible. Like, our team we want to have amazing customer support, right? And so like, it does require some money to manage accounts and to do all this stuff well. And because in most business contexts, engineers' time is valued at a hell of a lot more than zero. That's why, it almost always makes sense to get Convex in a business context. I think for your side project or as a hobbyist, sometimes you might say, I'm having fun writing more of the code anyway. I don't care if it takes longer. And I don't really want to get out my credit card to pay for something when I'm just hacking on the weeknights. And like, I would say, sounds completely fine, right? So sounds great to us. No issue with that. Use Convex open source. Use the free plan if it fits on that. And nothing wrong with that. But yes, at a certain point, if you really are like, okay, there's 2 of us, now there's 4 of us. We're trying to make something real that we ship that has a commercial ambition. Yes, your time is going to be valued at non-zero. And as you just said, engineers are actually quite expensive. And so something that makes you 30, 40% more efficient, it's actually worth quite a lot of money. And so therefore, Convex is actually a way to save a lot of money.
Yeah. It makes me, I remember when I went back to grad school to give a talk on behalf of Dropbox years ago, and people couldn't believe that someone would pay for Dropbox. Be like, why would you pay for this? Mm-hmm. And then I asked them like, who in the audience like downloads MP3s still like illegally, right? Mm-hmm. And everyone like put their hand up, right? And I'm like, I pay for Spotify and Netflix and whatever, Hulu Plus, and I don't even watch them that much. And people were like, whoa, what? Like, you're paying $7 a month? How could you be doing that? Right. And I think there was this mindset shift where like, it's not worth, ethically, I don't want to pirate music, but also I don't have time to do it. It's worth me paying whatever I pay for Spotify, because I can just listen to my music and then go about like building stuff and focusing. Right. So there's a subset of the community who are not in a position to pay $25 a month
Yep.
for a pro seat.
Right.
And that's cool. I get it.
Right.
Right. But if you're a professional software developer,
Yeah.
you are in that demographic of people who can pay $25 a month.
And at $25 a month in almost any geography of the world as well, right? So $25 a month.
And I just want to roast our own employees, right?
Okay. Well, they're not in here. Should we?
Yeah, we roast our own engineers. They forget all the time. Our engineers are talking about like how can we save $100 by spending 3 hours of time?
Yeah.
And you have to kind of remind people, you're professional software engineers, right? Your time is worth significantly more than that, right? Yeah. And it's just because we all, whatever, we
want to be efficient. Yeah.
Yeah. Many of us didn't have a lot of money previously and all that kind of stuff, right? But if you have a business, paying money for stuff makes a lot of sense. There was another thing you mentioned in there, and I just want to acknowledge it as a real critique. You said it's hard to estimate how much Convex will cost.
Yeah.
I think it probably is. We have a pricing scheme that's on our website that I hope is transparent, but I think it can be kind of hard to estimate how much usage your application will take.
Yeah.
And particularly, for example, if the difference between having like an index, like efficient queries that read from an index versus expensive queries and how much database usage. So I just want to acknowledge that as an issue.
Yeah, one of the things we've talked about is like we actually want to build a little like pricing simulator on the website or something. So you could pick one of a few different kinds of apps. Like if it's a chat app and it had this many users a day, and like just so we can try to put things a little bit more into terms that are relatable or whatever. But yeah, it's a challenge. I think it's a challenge for a lot of new platforms where the unit that's being multiplied by a certain amount of money is kind of a new unit, and because it's a new abstraction, and while that's cool, it also can be a little scary because you'd say, how many of those units am I going to rack up making a social app or whatever, right? And it's a little difficult to do that math confidently and say, okay, in the long run, if one day I have 1 million users on my app, I'm still going to be incredibly happy I chose Convex.
I think we could probably do a better job of having like a better pricing calculator on our website.
Yeah.
Or maybe some like case studies. I don't know how we would do this, but like maybe we could say, hey, look at this company over here. This is what their bill is. I don't know how we'd actually negotiate it with those companies to be transparent about that. But because I can tell people, like, I don't think Convex is particularly expensive.
Yeah.
You're not going to trust me.
I think, both the calculator, figuring that out to just help with that a bit. And then we can, the funny thing is it's the customers, and I think really understandable, that are at the precipice or brand new that are asking the biggest questions. The customers that have a lot of traffic or are already, they're actually usually quite happy with it because how quickly they've shipped their stuff. So they're so heavily into we've saved so much time that they're usually the happiest with the pricing. But the people at the outset have a lot of trepidation about it. And I understand why. So it's something we got to figure out how to make progress on.
All right, Jamie.
Yeah.
Jamie, you convinced me that
you're in the weird world.
As a professional software developer who has a real company, I should just spend money on stuff.
Including Convex.
Because my job is to produce things of value, and that's why I get paid. That's what I get paid for. But I'm still not convinced on this Convex thing, and in particular, I'm not convinced about this podcast you did. It was you and this guy Tom and this amazing guy called James Cowling.
He's a little ugly, but yeah.
That's all right. He's all right. He's all right.
Yeah.
And the podcast was an anti-SQL podcast, I think. It was like you're throwing a lot of shade on SQL. Right. And in particular, you're pointing out that that Convex is not a SQL database. But isn't like SQL, like I just hear like this almost like this catchphrase, never bet against SQL.
Right.
Yeah. And you'd asking me to bet against SQL?
Yeah.
That's a bad idea, right?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. You know what's interesting about the way that breaks down?
Tell me.
So on the way in, this is a terrible idea when it comes to SQL, right? What ends up not being a terrible idea really quickly is actually using SQL in Convex. So as much as developers love SQL, the thing they love even more are programming languages. And so since they use ORMs all the time and they're always masking their SQL with programming languages, so when you give them essentially programming languages as queries, they actually fall in love with that pretty fast. That ends up being not very controversial. So there's a few little gotchas, joins and things like that. Maybe we'll talk more about that next, actually, that are a little harder to express. But for the most part, the gains are really nice because there's no type mapping. Everything is type safe. It's fantastic. But here is a thing that is a little bit rough, is that even though they're like, oh, my application this actually got done really quick and it was all just TypeScript, it felt great. there's a lot of tools and stuff out there. There's a big ecosystem that all speak SQL. And so someone's like, hey, can I hook up this visualization tool, this BI tool, this something else, right? To, there's some adapter that wants to slurp data up and retain it somewhere else, right? So it's very fair to say SQL is basically the language that the world uses to move table data around, right? That is a problem right now. So those tools just, they don't really have a great way to talk to Convex. So
you're saying that like Convex developers tend to not miss in their daily life.
Really miss SQL
because they can write like real transactions in TypeScript, which is more expressive and more type safe and all that kind of stuff. But then when they want to go and point Tableau at their or some business intelligence tool at Convex, that's tricky because those things typically want to talk SQL.
They want to talk SQL, yeah.
So what do they do?
Yeah, so I mean, our original theory was, we're pretty familiar with tools like Fivetran and Airbyte and things like that, where, which is the way a lot of the world will stream stuff from, let's say, a transactional database to, let's say, a data warehouse, or some of these tools will stream it to another transactional database, whatever you want. I think the thing we've learned over time is going back to the earlier thing we were talking about kind of batteries included. People were like, I signed up for Convex because it kind of just does all the things for me. And we'd say, well, the good news is you can use the Fivetran connector. You can get your data into Bigtable. Then you can do whatever you want with it over there. And a lot of them would say, like, I kind of really don't want to do all that, right? So,
and I'll just kind of double down on this because this is an insight into like our product development, right? So we built this feature like, hey, cool, it's really easy to stream data from Convex into whatever, your analytics database via Fivetran, Airbyte, and we thought this would be like an amazing success because people could just do this and they have all their OLTP in Convex and then they stream the data into a data warehouse and they run their, back office, whatever. And people tend not to want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, some of the bigger customers are like, great, because they already have a data team and they love their data warehouse and they're using it for other things. And so they're like, great, solved. But, a lot of the folks that are building with Convex are startups, right? They're small teams. Again, they are the perfect sort of scenario in terms of the leverage a tool like Convex gives you, right? And so, they don't have a data team. They don't already have a data warehouse. And so saying, good news, you get to sign up for 2 more things just to be able to use SQL, it's not always an awesome answer. It ends up, and we were wrong about that. So I mean, it's one of the things we're looking into doing soon, and meaning second half of the year, so next 6 months or so, is we actually want to build a kind of SQL interface or an OLAP interface into Convex so that you can, without involving those external tools, be able to hook up a reporting interface or something like that to Convex, so you can write SQL queries that at least can select your data, analyze your data, stuff like that, and do it in a way that, lets you use all these tools and benefit from the power that SQL does sometimes give you.
Yeah, and we actually have a prototype of this that works. And so the idea is like, we actually think that like TypeScript is a great query language for like OLTP, meaning your live site transaction, low latency, high frequency, expressive transactional queries. SQL is still a pretty good language for like analytics stuff.
It's great for analytics, yeah.
Big batch queries that you run once a day or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we'll just add support for doing that.
Right. It's another place where the opinionation comes in, right? So if we ride along for a second on a scenario, the way this usually happens in smaller companies, that let's say they're using something like Postgres, is they write a bunch of queries that are more verbose versions of what you would write on Convex, A. B, someone starts adding something that's a little like a reporting query that's maybe for a dashboard or something like that. Nobody notices when they don't have many users. C, they get more and more users, their database starts slowing down. Everyone notices, it's this one query, it's when we do these big batches, it seems to slow down the SQL database. And so usually the next step is, it can't be completely indexed because they want to query on any arbitrary field. The truth is they actually have an OLAP pattern inside their OLTP database. And so usually the way they'll solve this is they run that query on the replica. And by the time you've done that, you sort of have already it's not consistent with respect to transactions. You can't change data in that query. Now you just have a bad OLAP database, actually. You're treating your OLTP database as a bad OLAP database, right? So in that opinionation side, Convex is actually kind of cutting out all those middle steps. And so kind of what we're talking about doing is probably just embedding like DuckDB or some kind of really good columnar OLAP database inside of Convex so that when you want to run SQL, it's a really good version of the place you end up with anyway by the time you do all this stuff.
It'll be read-only and intended for
Read-only, yep.
where SQL shines, really. And SQL's still a good fit, I think.
It's a really good fit for that.
Still, I mean, we had this whole podcast where we criticized SQL, but I think SQL is a great language for analytics queries.
Yeah.
I think it's not a good language for modern transactional.
Yeah, it's not. And so rather than have you do like de facto, half-baked OLAP by kind of using your replica, now you're kind of in slightly delayed data that you can't mutate, but you're running it on an OLTP database, which is not as good at those queries. We're actually going to give you a high-performance analytics engine right inside of Convex, and it will have the same characteristics where the data is slightly delayed because it's a replica, and it's only for reading, it's not for mutation. So yeah, we actually think it's kind of going to be the best of both worlds. So, but we don't have it yet, and so Convex sucks.
It does sound like it sucks.
All these strikes against it, There's probably some other strikes against it, though, right? When you're like writing queries, like not all queries are amazing. There's some things that we hear from users is a little harder to achieve certain things in Convex. So like what do you think, James? Is that a fair criticism?
Yeah. So I think there's something about the design of Convex that people might have issues with ergonomically, or they might have issues with performance-wise.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the ergonomic critique is a valid one, and the performance one is an invalid one. And in particular, I'll pick an example. So of joins. So Convex, the queries in Convex are TypeScript queries and TypeScript programs. And so they talk to the database. And if you want to do a join, for example, say you want to look up, all the posts on a page and all the comments for each post, right? The way you implement that in Convex right now is in the relatively intuitive way. If you're not a database engineer, right? You write one query that fetches all the comments, and then you write another query that fetches all the posts, and you write another query that reads every post ID and fetches the comment for each one. And you can do that concurrently. You can do that in a parallel map kind of thing in TypeScript. Mm-hmm. And ergonomically, well, maybe that could be a bit better if we had a join helper. We probably should just create like a join helper, to make this easier. So fair enough. I think it might be easy if there was like a join helper, and we have this other kind of layer on top of Convex called Ants, which makes like graph database style work a little bit more ergonomic and easier. So the second critique of people say like, whoa, this is so inefficient to be doing a join like this. And I think those people, it doesn't tend to happen from like serious database folks, because serious database folks know how databases are implemented, right? They just B trees and indexes. Like there's no magic inside a database, right? There's no such thing as a magical join in a database. If you send a join to a database, it just does this. It just reads one table and then looks up the IDs and goes and reads the rows they're pointed to. So I think people maybe don't realize maybe how primitive databases are in many respects. Right? Databases, like you've got SQL, which is this abstracted query language that's declarative, and then it runs through a query planner, and that query planner takes this declarative statement about what to look for into, hopefully, a good plan on what to do when walking over a bunch of B trees and looking up indexes and doing point reads and doing scans, range scans. And that's just what a database does. And so people are not maybe get caught by surprise. I've seen this happen many times, bigger companies, right? Someone writes a query which takes down production. Because that query maybe selects a random row. And what the query planner might be doing is copying the entirety of the table in a random order and picking a row from it, right? And so it's very easy in SQL to write queries that actually create very inefficient materialized views, right? And materialized view means you take some subset of a table and copy it in memory or on disk and produce a whole new table, and you use that to run the query of. And so there's no magic in SQL. If you're not reading from an index, it's just going to do a table scan. And you can see this if you're writing a SQL query, you just write and explain, and explain will tell you what it's going to do. And it's very easy to write a query that's very inefficient. And the reality is with joins, there's just no free lunch. There's different kinds of joins and different kinds of query plans, and some are more efficient than others. But at the end of the day, like joins are an inefficient thing to do.
Right. Sometimes developers will talk about somehow this N+1 thing got really popular a while ago to talk about N+1 problems or whatever. SQL databases don't magically make this go away, right? Because to your point, at the end of the day, there's only like B trees under the covers. So like if I have some kind of parent record and it has references to 16 other things, it's unlikely those 16 things are sequentially adjacent in the index or on disk. And so 16 things usually going and reading different blocks from different non-adjacent regions on disk or cache are going to have to be done. Like there's, indexes listing in order, maybe the ID or whatever, and then you have these other collections of things which can point to arbitrary things for a logical reason. These all belong to this, right, for some application specific reason. But those things are not like in one sequential read from the database. They're spread all over the place in the database. And so the kind of N+1 thing is happening. Your SQL server is doing it for you.
And so if you've worked at a bigger company with like very high write throughput, what you'll find is these companies don't let their engineers write raw SQL queries directly on the database, because someone could completely take down the product, take down production by writing inefficient queries. So generally they have these ORMs on top of them that restrict what you can do.
Yeah.
And one thing that's just true about Convex is that endeavors to make expensive things look expensive.
It's true. It's showing you what's actually happening, and believing there's a kind of virtue to that. It's a little bit more. The amount of work you see is the amount of work that's being done, and there is a kind of virtue to that, to making that transparent.
Yeah. And there's various aggregates that, in a SQL database just are expensive because they require a table scan, for example.
Yep.
And so I think we can improve our ergonomics. So I think we have a bunch of libraries and helpers that make aggregates easier, make joins easier.
Right.
I don't think it actually makes much of a difference on the performance side.
Right.
Especially there's optimizations we can do with query pushdown, and where we actually run we run these queries very close to the database. We can only run them in the database themselves.
Yep.
So there's things we can do optimization-wise. I think at the end of the day, this is mostly an ergonomic issue, not a performance issue.
Right. So that's joins, but what about things like aggregates, right? So we sometimes hear about these like, hey, if I want to keep a running total of records like this, right? That's kind of hard to express in Convex. Like, do I have to manually denormalize everything? Like,
yeah, right now you do. Right now you do. Now you mentioned earlier that we have this component system coming out. We actually have like an aggregate component that will do these things for you.
Yeah.
But it's just, again, there's just no free lunch.
Right.
That's at the end of the day, you have to understand that databases just aren't magic.
Right.
And I think sometimes it's good and healthy to be exposed to situations where the magic just doesn't apply.
Right.
To not be disillusioned.
Yeah.
And so, Convex does force you, and this is part of the opinionatedness of it, Convex does force you to write your queries in efficient ways.
Right.
It forces you to think about how expensive something's going to be, because it's just, as you write it, you can tell, oh wow, I'm writing a pretty expensive thing right now. The Convex query language, we have a filter operation. So filter is a table scan, and we used to make you write table.fullTableScan.filter just to remind you that you're doing a bit of a baddie thing right now.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have kept it that way.
Yeah, we removed it, and boy, going back to like, why does Convex suck? The number one reason why someone will have a surprising usage or a surprising bill is almost always at this point, because we'll reach out to chat with them, or like are using indexes in all the different places. They'll have accidentally used filter instead of with index, and then not realizing that they had a table scan there.
I've got another reason Convex sucks.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to forget to add indexes.
Yes.
So for folks who, some people will really know what I'm talking about here, and some might not, right? So databases, it is tables of information. Database is kind of like a spreadsheet in some respect, but it's a B tree. And an index is an efficient way of pointing into that B tree.
Right.
So for example, if you have a list of all the users at your company, all your customers, and you have an index on whether they've paid their bill or not.
Yep.
Right. So that index really is almost a full copy of that data, right? Sorted by whether they paid their bill or not, right? Yep. So an index is like a secondary representation of that data that creates an efficient way of looking it up.
Right.
So generally, when you're writing a high-performance application, you want almost all your reads to be indexed reads, because an index read is like a single-point read or a single range read, as opposed to doing a full table scan, which can be very expensive on a large table, right? So Convex, has indexes, but you have to define them.
Yeah.
And I think developers can forget to do that, or
it's
not
easy to forget,
or not realize they have to do that, and kind of accidentally write a slow query. And we can do a better job of letting them know.
Yeah.
We can do a better job of education, and I think we should, and we plan on doing this, kind of adding alerts in the dashboard, email alerts, like kind of notifications that say, hey, you could write this query more efficiently.
Yeah.
Hey, you're doing this thing. Maybe you can add an index on that field, and your query will be way faster.
Yep.
I just want to I'm going to say something in defense of you, Jamie Turner.
Oh, okay. Oh,
defense of
do
you.
I need defending?
In defense of you as you do.
Uh-oh.
You do. In defense of you as a human being.
Uh-oh.
Because I like you. That's why I started.
I'm so worried about this now.
No, you've talked before about how you like Amazon's AWS's business model, and how so if you are a big customer of AWS, you'd have like a customer support and solutions architect person associated with you. And the vibe I get from them is, and I think I'm not being naive, they're not trying to trick you into wasting money. They will reach out and say, hey, you could be doing this thing differently and your bill would be lower.
Yeah.
Right. So I almost think their job is to do the right thing by the customer.
Yeah.
And the thing I want to say in support of you is, you've said this multiple times as well. You would like for Convex to be the kind of company where our goal is to reduce the bills of our customers.
Yeah, right? We want them to love the product.
So we don't want to trick someone into writing an inefficient query so they use up more usage, and our usage is slightly higher. But then look, sure, there's an ethical component to just wanting to do the right thing, and it's more fun to do the right thing. Yeah. But also they're going to churn, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, developer reputation is everything with developers, right? So every time I see a customer's bill spike, I reach out to them, and there's usually two things. I'm like, please be that you blew up and you went crazy on Twitter. Please be, or whatever, right? And because it's usually either that or they forgot to add an index to something. And so that second thing is never the right reason to talk to a customer. So yeah, something we have to fix. We want to have a successful service. We want to be making money when our customers are making money. We want them to love, because in the long run, that's what matters. Word gets around. We want to have phenomenal service for our customers. So yes, making more money in the short term because people accidentally write jobs that are inefficient, that's not something we're proud of. And that's why I think it's a very fair addition to our list we're doing here, is calling that out. So
cool. All right, Jamie. All right. I think you've convinced me that Convex sucks.
I've convinced you Convex sucks. Yeah. Ugh. I think whether or not these things are deal breakers for companies, probably it's one of those things where for every team and every company, they're going to be at a different place where maybe a level of confidence, where, how well they know Convex, how well they know the team, what kind of progress we make on these things. There's different levels of faith the people we work with kind of build over time and us improving these things. But yeah, I think it's fair to say some of these things are small problems for some folks versus the benefits they get from Convex. And for some teams, they're bigger problems. And it's why, we need to focus on knocking all these out. And I think one of the things you and I already talked about is we're going to double back on this at some point down the road. And hopefully we'll have eliminated a few of these. But also the other thing, too, is just admitting ahead of time, there might be a few new ones we have to.
Oh, yeah. I can't wait for the next episode of Convex.
Convex Sucks Part 2, yeah. But in the meantime, until that episode exists, we also, as you know, we have the domain convex.sucks that we got a while ago.
Yeah, I don't know how, somehow we discovered that, the URL convex.sucks exists, and so we bought it.
We bought it. We're like, we should probably do something with this. That might have even just inspired the episode a little. It's like, we bought Convex Sucks. Our team has a fair amount of self-deprecating humor. We're like, we're gonna have to figure out what to do with Convex Sucks. So what we'll do with Convex Sucks is, and if you're hearing this, go check it out, and we're gonna immortalize this list. Let's put this list up there, and we can just track over time if we're making progress on these things or whatever. Also, too, maybe we should even put a form on there.
We should have a form. We should have a running list of things you think that suck about Convex. Now, look, obviously, you'll know this is a tongue-in-cheek episode, right? I love Convex, and Jamie loves Convex, and our users love Convex. But I like to be transparent about the things about it that could be better.
Yeah.
And so if you're a Convex user or a Convex hater, wouldn't that be cool? Have some real haters out there.
Haters, yeah.
Hit up convex.sucks.
Submit what else sucks about Convex. Let us know.
And it's on us to acknowledge it and make it better.
That's right. Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess we did it. Yeah. No Tom. So we just sat here and ratted on. I'm not sure he would have let us. He knew we were doing this, but I'm not sure. He's like, all right, you guys, go ahead.
I wonder how many buttons we pushed on this one.
That's right.
See.
Yeah, we'll see. But cool. Thank you all for tuning in and checking it out. And we'll be back in a couple weeks when we'll be back to criticizing something else that's not.
Yeah, we'll throw some shade on something else.
Well,
all right.
Maybe we'll be positive.
Maybe we'll be positive.
Let's talk about something we love. Let's do like a positive affirmation.
Okay, next episode is going to be a positive episode about something cool.
That sounds great. All right. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, everybody.
Bye.